Everyone. Well, it is 10 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. And I know some people might still join us, so we will but we'll go ahead and start the first little bits of conversation. So first of all, welcome. Yay. Thank you all so much for being here. I want to say welcome to season 2, I guess you could say, a virtual coffee with a curator. Thank you all so much. If you're new and this is your first time attending, wow, thank you so much for being here. I think you're going to enjoy it. I really thank you for giving us a try. If you have been attending and you're one of our regulars, thank you so much for just sticking by this program. I hope y'all had a wonderful, restful summer. I hope that your summer was safe and just wonderful. And I'm so glad that you decided to come back to our Wednesday programs. It really means a lot. I think it's going to be a great semester, a great year. I've got so many wonderful things planned. So I really think that we're all going to have a great time. Okay, so if you are new to the program, one thing that you're going to find is that every week we start with a really fun segment called Where's Andrew? Andrew, can you raise your hand for those who are new? Okay, there's Andrew. And so what we do, Andrew changes his background each week, and it's going to, and it usually is some place that is either a library or a bookstore. It's some type of bookish place. And we have to try to figure out where's Andrew. And Andrew is very nice because he usually tries to kind of theme this location based on, the discussion we're going to be having. So today we're going to be talking about hand-pressed books, so books from many, many years ago, back when books were made by hand, in addition to other summer adventures that anybody has. So I think we can go ahead and dive in. Andrew, do you want to say, sometimes Andrew gives us clues, not all the time, sometimes. Andrew, do you want to say anything about this particular location where you are?
Well, if you haven't already guessed it, the connection is printing, as evidenced by the massive printing press behind me. And today's book's actually very realistic. I was very happy I found this, as it sort of vaguely looks like I'm actually sitting here.
Yeah, it definitely does. It's a really good one. So great. So inspired by printing, huge printing press behind Andrew. Okay. I'm rusty because we haven't been doing this for a few weeks, but this is informal. So if y'all want to just give it a shot. And a lot of times what we do is we start by asking Andrew, we start interrogating Andrew about locations or any type of clues we can get. Andrew, is there any, okay, so Tamara says Germany.
It's actually not in Germany.
Not in Germany. That was a really great guess, Tamara, thinking of Johannes Gutenberg and
good hint, if my finger will show up.
I see American flags.
Yes, my finger's disappearing, but there is an American flag.
I just Googled it if I can cheat.
No cheating.
Oh, no.
Is that Mark Twain? The photo behind your head, is that Mark Twain?
Let me pull up another copy of the picture. Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
I didn't see it.
Connecticut? Are you in Connecticut?
No.
Oh, darn. Okay.
Is the city?
Are you in Philadelphia?
No.
No.
Give up.
But you are in the U.S., right?
I am definitely in the United States. Yes.
Okay. We're just confirming. Okay.
I was reading up on a pre-revolutionary printer named Gaines this weekend. And it makes me, I think he was printing things about 1774, 73, 74. I mean, he was active before that, but boy, he was a colorful character.
Unfortunately, it's not connected to a colonial printer. I'll also say that.
Okay.
It's not colonial.
Interesting. Well,
specifically colonial. I'll put it that way.
Okay. One of our attendees, Ellie, guessed asking if you were in New York.
Afraid not.
Wow. I'm like, okay. Andrew.
What about West Coast, San Francisco?
California.
Oh, okay,
Um,
great.
so kind of I was thinking of Twain and Jack London and yeah.
Let's see, any more guesses? I think I'm glad at least we got to the state. We got to California. We know that Andrew, are we leading ourselves down the correct path by thinking of this Mark Twain connection?
I am not aware of any connection to Mark Twain aside from the picture. I don't think there's actually anything.
Okay, all right. Well, anybody have any last guesses? Because I think I'm spent.
Maggie, will you tell us?
Well, no, I don't know if 100% if I'm correct, but it's located in Carson, California at the International Printing Museum.
It is.
Oh.
Who knew there was such a thing?
You got
Well
it
done.
right. Congrats.
So Carson, that's near Lake Tahoe, Sierras. Is that where it is? Carson, near Nevada?
I didn't bother to check Google Maps.
That is awesome. Well, that's really interesting. I hadn't heard of it, but the nice thing is, y'all, Andrew always does a handout for us, if you remember. So he just put that into the chat. So make sure you download the handout.
I'm sorry, I just looked it up. Carson is actually south of Los Angeles, right near Long Beach.
Oh, wow. Okay. Did not know that. Very exciting. Sounds like we're going to have to, that sounds like a trip I need to take. I've only been to California once, so that's exciting. Thank you so much, Andrew. That was a really good one. Different places than we would have thought. So thank you for that. Coming in strong on this first episode of the second season. Thank you. Okay. So that was our segment, Where's Andrew? So now we're going to move on to our second part of the program. Well, it's been a long summer and we haven't seen each other. So what I want to do is spend some time, and this is kind of just an open floor here, to talk about maybe some bookish adventures that we've had this summer. So if there's been any type of, if you've collected a book, if you went to a new bookstore, if you were able to, I don't know, if your library safely reopened and you were happy to be there, you came across an interesting book, anything, or any type of printed text that you came in contact with that was interesting. I'd love to hear if you have a story. You have a bookish adventure from the summertime. And we can give you a minute to think if you need it, but just let me know if you have one.
Well, I can start if you'd like me to. You brought up going to a new bookstore, and I didn't think about that, but I did try out a couple of new bookstores. Well, used bookstores, but new stores to me because I had never been there. And they were nice, they were okay, but they're not my favorite bookstore, which is located in Mableton. The Book House is my favorite, and even though these other bookstores were great, I tried, I really did. But one thing that you want me to go ahead and talk about what we talked about this summer about collecting books and stuff?
Absolutely. And then when you're done, maybe you can put the link to, the Book House has a website, maybe you can put that link in the chat.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. It's amazing. Well, anyway, so when I do go to the Book House,
You want me to write it down?
when I do go to the Book House, the first place I always go to is the classic literature section. And since I've been going there for so long, literally every time I go to the classic literature section, I find like 6 at least different versions of Frankenstein. And there's always new ones coming and going. And so I just kept seeing them every time. So for months and months. And then I thought, you know, maybe I should start buying the different Frankensteins because there's so many of them. And I didn't know, it never really occurred to me, but I know the books are published by different publishers, different times, different eras and stuff. So I brought all the Frankensteins that I have so far. And I've only just started collecting paperbacks, if you guys would like to see them.
You have them in your office, some of them?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
This is the first Frankenstein. Is it backwards?
No, it's right.
Okay. This is the first Frankenstein that I ever bought. And the reason why I bought it, because I had never read it. And so I bought it to read it because this is the same cover of Mary Shelley's book, The Last Man.
Yep.
And I thought it was interesting that they used the same painting for 2 books by the same author.
That's awesome.
So then this is the Dover Classics edition, but then there's the Dover Thrift edition.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another cover of the Dover Thrift edition, which I think is really cute. And Dover actually comes out, the Thrift editions, they come out with new covers all the time. So this is a really cool cover. It's kind of older. And this one has another classic painting on the front, as well as another classic painting on the front of this one. I like collecting the classic paintings. But my absolute favorite that I read immediately as soon as I got it is this. It's like a little graphic novel, but it's not a novel. It's, it's a short little novella, but it's for children, it's for students. So it's like, it puts it in everyday language that kids can understand.
Oh,
And everyday language that I can understand, because Mary Shelley's a little heavy sometimes. But it's on the back, it says reading is fun, and there's lots of different ones. There's The Call of the Wild, The Time Machine, H.G. Wells. So it's introducing children to the classics, and I just love it. And that's it, I guess. That's all I have so far.
That is amazing. And there's, I listened to a podcast once, the Brattle Bookshop in Boston. They've got a podcast, and one of the episodes was all about people who collect various editions of the same book. A lot of people, that's their thing. They collect the same book, whether it's, Frankenstein, maybe, I know one person collected the Diary of Anne Frank, or the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Like, people just will collect the same, especially books that have been in print for so long. And
I started collecting the same editions of a book, but not realizing that was a thing that collectors did.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was cool. I don't know if you guys remember, I brought a pop-up of Chronicles of Narnia a while back. I have 3 different kinds of Narnia, because one is the 7 books in a separate box set. One is all 7 books together in one big fat book, and then the pop-up book. So I have 3 versions of the same book, and didn't even realize that was a thing that people did. So now I'm going to collect hardbacks and paperbacks and different languages, and I don't know, I'm excited.
That's awesome. So Maggie had the book house, and then lots of Frankenstein. Wonderful. Cohen's, did you all have something to say?
I just wanted to say that when the library opened, it made me very happy and made me think that the world was about to come back. So it was a very pleasant experience.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's great. And, even though we're experiencing the Delta variant right now, I feel like libraries have found, it's like we've all been in this so long, we found ways to make this work. I feel the same way you did, because the public library just contacted me a couple of days ago, North Cobb Regional, and they were asking me to do the rare book children's programs that I usually do. And it's like, for so long, they're like, sorry, we can't. But it's like, no, we figured out how to safely do this. And it's like, yay, I can be back in the library with the children safely, taking lots of precautions. So I know what you mean. It just feels right to be able to go back in your library. Absolutely. Anyone else have a bookish adventure from the summer they want to share?
I have 2 real quick.
Okay.
First of all, as I know you were well aware, I volunteered at KSU this summer. Got to work with a lot of their books, and that was very fun. Definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, we were so happy to have you.
Any books with me.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I actually, as part of my own collections, found a very fun one. It's had to take off the background, an 1880 Atlas. It's by William Collins and Sons, and each of the pages is designed to be removed. In fact, only one of them has been. One's just loose, but the rest are all intact, all here. But the problem is it took forever to figure out how old it is, as it said on eBay 1860, which, as I stated looking into it, was very obviously maybe not truthful. And I was able to date some of the maps using a map age guide to 1872, just based, I think it was on Budapest being 2 cities.
Wow.
But then I found that the company actually changed its name in 1880 to what's inside the front cover. So turns out a lot of stuff is wrong with it, with the date. But I was able to find it is sometime around 1880. So I was finally able to figure that out.
That's awesome. So Andrew, if you were cataloging that book, as Maggie and I know, we would have a little circa 1880 and we would feel very happy about that. that is really exciting. So Andrew, where did you find that gem?
This was eBay.
It was on eBay. Okay.
Yes.
So you were able to get, oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So that was, so the person who advertised it on eBay, then they didn't have the correct date.
Yes.
I see. Oh, okay. That's good. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's great that you were able to do your research and didn't just take that, that one record or advertisement at face value.
The thing that sort of got me onto it that may not be truthful is one of the maps is labeled as Europe in 1876, which had to start me thinking, this probably isn't 1860. It's definitely a fun adventure.
That's awesome. Congrats on that. That's great. Anybody? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say to comment on the first thing that Andrew said about volunteering up here at the KSU, at the Rare Book Museum. He almost puts me to shame because he's so good at what he does. I mean, I would hire him in a heartbeat if I owned my own museum. He's amazing. Also, he inspires me because this happened over the summer and I totally forgot. I bought this book because of him. So this is actually in my own personal collection in my office, but it was because of the presentation that Andrew gave.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yay. Lori.
Hi, everybody. So I wanted to let you know that I have some family members in attendance today. My husband, Rich Snyder, is here, and also our cousin, Jamie Alicio. And Jamie's going to play into one of our Bookish events for the summer. Now, I would like to share, we've had a late summer development, and then I'll get to the good stuff. But Rich and I were able to attend the CABS conference this year, and it just wrapped up last week. For anyone unfamiliar with CABS, it's the Colorado Antiquarian Antiquarian Books Seminar. Got it. And it's complimentary to the Rare Book School. There are a couple of premier educational endeavors. And we were able to attend one, and we learned so much, and it was just very rewarding, and I'm so glad that we did that. So earlier in the summer, Jamie reached out to us, and knowing that we are book lovers and collectors, and that Rich has a fledgling bookshop, and offered to share with us some of his mother's books, antiquarian books. Rosemary, Jamie's mom, was a very skilled book collector and bookseller. And there was a small collection at Jamie's dad's house, and they were trying to find a good home for it. And Rich and I came to mind. We met with Jamie a couple of times about the acquisition, and he very sweetly drove up to Jamie. Where was that? Is it Indiana? Oh, I think you're muted, Jamie.
And now you can hear my dog.
Yeah.
Northwest Indiana near Chicago. That's where my dad lives. Yeah.
Thank you, Jamie. So Jamie drove all the way up there to see his dad, and he brought these wonderful books home with him. And it's several hundred books. I would say at least a third of them were antiquarian in nature. And we saw books from the 1800s, the 1700s, the 1600s, and there were a couple of books from the 1500s in this collection. Never held a book that old in my life. And I engage. It's just a beautiful collection. And at some point I have those older books in their own case, and have some nice photographs of them. So I wasn't prepared to share those today, but anyway, Rosemary's books are just spectacular. But the oldest one that we found was, I think, like 1585. And I happen to know a rare books expert by the name of JoyEllen. And I engaged JoyEllen to help me learn about this wonderful little book. So if it's okay, Jamie, would you like to say anything before JoyEllen tells us about her experience with that special book?
I don't think there's much I could add besides what you said, except that I'm so excited to hear what she has found out about this. This is a real treat for me.
Right. Well, we're really glad that you're here to engage with us. So, all right. So, JoyEllen, may I go ahead and pass the baton to you? And
yes, basically, yeah. I'm going to get started in just a second. I think we have time for one more story in case anybody has another little story to Bookish summer adventure. But then after that, I will get right into it.
Can I ask a quick question? Lori said that her husband, y'all have a fledgling bookshop. What is that?
Well, Rich does. During the pandemic, he opened up an online bookstore. Because our libraries, when we got married, they were large anyway, and then we had like a massive home library. So we saw an opportunity for Rich to start his own business. And he has been building his company. And it's, I tried it. I try hard to keep it separate from work because it's a personal thing, but if you'd like, I'm more than happy to point you in the direction. But it's not something I actively advertise on campus.
Well, this would not be advertising. This would just be sharing with fellow book lovers. If you'd like to put the link in the chat, I'm sure several of us would like to go look at it.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you, Maggie. I appreciate you asking.
Thanks.
So exciting, and congratulations to Rich on just doing this. This is great. Of course, everyone in this group appreciates that. We are so excited. Wonderful. Well, if anyone thinks of another story, we might have some time at the end, but I'd love to share with you my summer adventures, which Lori alluded to and Jamie alluded to. But first, I want to say, if I were to kind of summarize, what did I do this summer involving books, it would be hand-pressed books, bibliographical description of hand-pressed books. And it sounds like it actually is as complicated as it sounds, but it's so much fun too. And then learning about the idea of bibliography is something that blew my mind. And we're going to have some fun with that today. So first of all, but I will say the first thing I did this summer was I missed you all. I missed this program. So I'm so glad that we are back. So if y'all don't mind, I have a little presentation. I'm gonna have to start and stop it because we're gonna do a fun activity. And if you haven't already, make sure you have, if you want to, make sure you have an 8x11 piece of paper handy and a pencil because, okay, great. Because we're gonna do a little fun paper folding activity that's gonna help us understand paper, hundreds of years ago. So I think that'll be really fun. But I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so you can see my presentation. And then we'll stop it soon once okay. So here's my little presentation. What did you do this summer? Hand-pressed books. So the first thing that really was exciting to me, and I must shout out my photographer, Maggie has become my personal photographer. She takes pictures of me with books all the time. So thank you, Maggie. But what is bibliography? Well, bibliography, in one sense, is actually the study of printed text as physical objects. So many of you may be thinking, well, that's not my definition of bibliography. What about that list of sources I always had to include in my research papers when I was in school or in at university? You are right. That is one type of bibliography, and it is called enumerative bibliography. So that's the systematic listing of texts, according to some guiding principle. We all appreciate that. But what we're going to be kind of delving into today is analytical bibliography. And that's the kind of bibliography that helps us understand how texts are put together or how they were meant to be put together. So it is so much fun. Basically, it's all about being a book detective. So when you're a bibliographer, so Andrew, when you were looking at your atlas and realizing, I don't think this date is right. And how can I tell? What are some clues? That's doing bibliography work. So we all do it when we're really interested in something. Like I said, bibliography helps us understand how texts are put together, or sometimes how they were meant to be put together, or how they evolved into various editions, maybe how they were distributed to the public, how they were used, how they were interpreted. And people might wonder, why is this important? But we can share this information with other people through catalog records, through rich bibliographical descriptions. We can help enable scholarship. We can inspire further historical and literary inquiry. So it's something that we can do. We can figure out what happened in the past and what that means for us now. I really love this quote by one of the most famous bibliographers. I have it on the bottom of my slide. By Sir Walter Gregg, and it says the goal, it is a truncated version, but the goal of bibliography is, quote, to reconstruct for each particular book the history of its life. So books have lives, and we can try to figure it out and put it back together and figure out why it matters now, and what this, who owned this book, who touched it. And what led to it being right here in my hands. Things that we can explore through bibliography, and these are things that I learned in my Rare Book School class. We talked about paper a lot. We talked about type, so like printed type. We talked about printing practices. We talked about publishing and binding, how books were distributed. We talked about the importance of illustrations and what types of illustrations there were and how you can tell how something was illustrated. We talked about how text was kind of transmitted and all the different editions it might have been in. And it was just fascinating. So as you can tell, I learned a lot. These are the elements of bibliographical description that I learned: format, collational formula, statement of signing, number of leaves, pagination statement, and notes. So you'll see all that at work in this really cool formula that I'm able to create. So we'll talk about that later. But I've been using this word hand pressed books. So perhaps you might be wondering, what does that mean? Well, hand-pressed books were books that were printed roughly between the years 1500 and 1800. So these books were made by hand. All parts of the process were done by hand. So that means making the paper was done by hand. Crafting and designing the type that you could print on the paper was all done by hand. Everything was done by hand. So this is the period where paper was made by mashing. For example, I just took some of these pictures from Google just to give you a little examples, but paper was made by mashing rag linens, oftentimes like old rags, maybe like underwear sometimes, mashing those rags into a pulp, soaking them in water, and then laying them on the decal, which you see on the left. You lay them there to dry, and then it makes paper, which is handmade paper, which you can see in the middle. And then the way that you communicate on that paper is through inked type. So you can see on the right here some type in cases. Type was made by people literally had to carve out the letters onto these little steel bars. And, and then of course you ink those once they were actually made into type, which involved a whole nother process that I don't have time to get into. They were laid out into sentences and pages by a compositor that was inked and pressed onto the paper with a printing press, and then it was sent out. These big sheets were sent out to the binder to be folded and bound. So this process wasn't really automated until, well, really not large scale until the 19th century. It started to be automated in the late 18th century, but machine press books, so books printed really after, 1800, 1830, where they were printed mostly by the machine, that really changed things. But for hundreds of years, they were all made by hand. So I will show y'all an example of a hand pressed book in just a second when we do our paper activity. Let's see. Ooh, so again, Maggie took this picture. Thank you, Maggie, of me holding up this page. Can you all see, if you look really closely, and this, just so you know, that red circle is digitally added. We're not circling any books in our collection. That red circle that I digitally added, if you all look really closely, can you see something? Can you see something?
Some kind of image?
Yes, something that looks a little bit like it's faint. But yeah, so that is called, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to go there. There we go. That is called a watermark. And that is something that we're going to be kind of talking about today. So that's something that you find something that you find in hand pressed books, in their paper. And there's a reason for that, because there were two types of paper really that were used during the hand press period, laid and wove. So laid paper was made on the decal, like we saw before, that little, in the previous slide, we saw the decal that the pulp was laid on. And the thing about the decal, it had wire or wire mesh that had a bunch of lines, but often there was a little kind of a distinguishing mark that was in the decal. And that's where that watermark comes from. So when the paper was laid on there, wet, and then it dried, it took on that mark. And then when you put it up to the light, you can see it. I mean, you can even I just use a flashlight of my phone, but there are also some really fancy, expensive backlights you can get, but you can do this detective work yourself. If you have a hand press book and a phone, you can find the watermarks. Now, the cool thing is, depending on how the binder folded the paper and put it together, that can tell us, the watermark can help tell us how this book was put together and what format it was meant to be in. And we will stop for a second and we'll do our activity so you guys can see kind of how what this one sheet of paper can tell you about how a book was put together during the hand press period. So everybody, let's get your piece of paper if you have one. If not, that's totally fine. You can just watch. Okay, so take your piece of paper. Now I want you to hold it landscape. Okay, so to the side. All right, so do that, put it down, landscape, and I want you to draw a line straight through the middle. It's okay if it's not perfectly straight, as best you can do. Mine's not going to be straight. Right through the
Vertically or horizontal?
Oh, sorry. Vertically like this. So vertically right through the middle. Okay, so once you've done that, put it down in front of you again. Now on the right side, so go to the right side, I want you in the middle of that right column, because there should be two columns, in the middle of that right column, I want you to draw like in the center, like a medium-sized illustration. So I'm going to draw a really quick and ugly flower. Mine's not even centered really well, so I might have to start it over. I might need to move it this way. But as best you can, in some type of the center here, here's mine. So draw something. It can be a flower, it can be a, I don't know, star, it can be, oh, wonderful. Maggie drew a little duck. That's great. Could be a unicorn, could be an apple, anything. Okay, so yay, great. So we all, once you've drawn it, okay, so let's hold up again. Now let's hold it. So do what I'm doing. Hold it in front of you, okay? Now what I want you to do is I want you to take your right hand and I want you to meet your left hand and let's fold. It's okay if you have to put it down to fold. I do to make it straight. Let's fold. There you go. All right. So you see here we have more of a kind of a rectangular shape. And if we open it, all right, just like what we saw, we had our right here, our watermark. So what we have done is we've created essentially a folio format. So if this was our full sheet, we've created a book that's in a folio format, meaning that it has 2 leaves, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 individual pages, and the watermark is in the center of one side, in the center of one page. So that's a folio. Okay, so now what I want to do, let's fold it back and notice this rectangular shape again, like you said. Now I want y'all to, let's go landscape again. So turn it. Okay, turn it. And now I want you to do the same thing we did. Let's take your right hand and meet your left hand. And let's fold that. Oh, so we see we've got a little bit more of a squarish shape now, right? Okay, now it's hard to see because, you know, we kind of have to look because when you fold it again, you know, you can't see inside. You would need to cut it. But can you tell where your watermark has moved to? Where do you see it? If you can kind of see it faintly, where is it resting now? Exactly. So it's kind of probably folding a little bit over here. It's in the gutter. It's in the gutter of this fold. Okay, so just like in a hand press book, if you see a squarish shape book and the watermark, if you hold up to light, is in the gutter of kind of these inner, right here, around this inner spine fold, you've got a quarto format. So that's what that's called, a quarto. And then if we had those chain lines, they would be running horizontally, not vertically. Anyway, but we didn't talk about chain lines. I'm just saying. All right, let's do one more time. So I want you to tilt it again to be landscape. And now let's take our right hand and meet our left hand. It's getting a little harder to fold. Gotta have to force it a little bit. Okay, and notice we're back to a rectangular shape again. That's so interesting. So it might be hard to see, but can you tell where your watermark has kind of moved again? It's not strictly in the gutter anymore.
Middle.
Yeah, it's probably kind of more up top in the corner, one of the corners.
Yes.
Yeah, it's up top here in the corner, in the kind of an upper inner margin. So if we see a hand press book like this with a more rectangular shape and the watermark is kind of up in the, and we put it up to the light and the watermark is up in an inner margin, that's called an octavo. Okay, so what you can see here, and we won't go any farther because it gets harder and harder, but you can fold more. But in an octavo, we have 8 leaves and 16 pages. If we go back to our quarto, we have 4 leaves and 8 pages. Then if we go all the way back to our folio, again, we're 2 leaves and 4 pages. So that is how that really kind of describes format during the hand press period. One thing to note, someone said this to me once and I was like, oh, that makes sense. They were like, all books in the hand press period were made from folded sheets of paper. And I was like, I'm so glad someone just said it. That just makes a lot of sense to me. They were made from folded sheets of paper. So a lot of times the sheets they started with were definitely bigger than 8.5 by 11. but they would print on the full big sheet. They would print those different. So it's actually, when you think about it, the printers weren't taking little itty bitty pieces of paper and printing that. They were taking big sheets and they would arrange the type in a big form so that it was printing like multiple sheets that were laid out, and then they would fold it all up. So that's why when you look at books from the hand press period, like Lori and Jamie's book, a book like this, and we see, you know, signatures, little things like this was because you had to put some kind of marking or notation to help the binder know how to fold everything. Again, you had to have catchwords. So if you look even farther, we see a signature and a catchword. This is the word that's going to start the next page. So to help the binder know, okay, this is correct. Because the printer's like, okay, I'm printing this. Let me help the binder know how to fold it. And so you see all those clues that this was something that was done by hand. This was something that took multiple people. This wasn't a project that one person did. If that were the case, they wouldn't have had to put all those extra, you know, helpers in there, all those indicators. But anyway, I hope this was a fun little activity so you can kind of see how books were how they were kind of folded to make them work. So most books I've noticed during the hand press period are going to be a lot of them I've noticed are octavo format, you know, but then books maybe that were like religious or books that were meant to be a little bit, you know, more expensive would be in a folio format. So all sorts of things like that. But that was just a fun activity I thought we would do. I've got one more activity for us to do before we get into our amazing book that Lori and Jamie let me look at it and play with.
Hey, JoyEllen, before
yes.
you continue, are you familiar with the ruins of the paper mill that's in Cobb County where they made paper out of rags?
You know, I am not. I know that there's a paper mill road.
Yeah, it's there in where the Chattahoochee, it's Soap Creek, and there's Chattahoochee River trails in there, state-owned trails, and the ruins of that paper mill are there. And my son had a teacher who knew the whole history. I only know a little bit, but they made paper from rags, and it was closed in, I think, the sort of mid to late 1800s because of outbreak of cholera. But it was a genuine paper mill where they, you know, made paper from rags.
Well, I have my research project for the next couple weeks. That is so cool. You know, it's so funny. I feel like my husband ignored me because we were driving on Paper Mill Road and I was like, I want to live on this road. And he was like, okay, whatever. But that is, you know, I wondered if there was a story behind that. And it sounds like there is. So you said there was probably a teacher that might know some information about that.
You know, I'll see if I can get a hold of her. They built that Soap Creek Elementary School about 35 years ago, maybe now. Mm-hmm. She was there from the beginning. And at that time, there were still farms around there. And so she got to know some of the people that had been there for a while. And it was a gentleman that knew the whole history, and she'd gotten it. I'll see if I can get it from her. I haven't heard from her in a number of years, but I'll see if I can track her down. It was really interesting.
That would be great. Thank you so much. That is fascinating because I have become very interested in how paper was made this summer, as y'all can tell. So that is really, really cool. What a great local connection.
Yeah, if you drive on Paper Mill and you go over that bridge where the creek is, and there's some parking a little further along, you can walk back to the creek and actually walk among the ruins. Part of the building is still there.
And that makes sense because one thing I learned in class is, you know, paper mills, they always had to be near water. They have to be near water. So that actually makes a lot of sense. Yay. Oh, that's so exciting. Thank you so much. So last little activity I'm going to bug y'all with, but it's so much fun. We also talked about type. Let's see if I can, okay. They're basically, as we all know, probably have heard of this before, but type are representations in reverse of letters of the alphabet cast in relief. So they're literally kind of gouged out on the ends of rectangular metal stalks. So that's what type was. And that is how we were able to get letters, representations of letters on paper. So the cool thing about type is you can do so many different typeface comparisons. So fun fact, if you guys go in Microsoft Word, you might see, for example, I don't know if anyone uses the Garamond font. Well, that name actually means something because Garamond, I'm probably not saying that right, he was French, was one of the greatest French punch cutters during the hand press period. So he was famous for for designing and cutting out this type. And so hence Garamond became the font that he was famous for. So if y'all look at these different typefaces here, I don't know, what do you see that's different? What are some things that, I mean, they're all Roman type. They're not Gothic, they're Roman type. But what are some differences you can see between different letters or different ways that they're presented?
I find the absence of tails and tops on the T's in is it Dido or Didot?
Ah, I see. So very interesting. Oh, and then Ellie says spacing and boldness. Absolutely. Some are, thicker in some areas. Some of them, like that bottom one, looks like it just takes up, the whole thing just takes up more space. One thing that I think is really cool, I had never noticed this before, until I took Rare Book School. Y'all look at the different O's in the different typefaces and notice that the axis that they're on, like for example, in Times New Roman, I never noticed that the O in Times New Roman is the axis is slanted. Whereas in Courier, if you put an axis, it'd be just straight up and down. So I know this is getting super granular, but I think this is just so cool because this really shows you that, especially when type was made by hand, there's a reason why certain punch cutters and certain designers became famous for their designs, their type, because people liked it, because there was something about it that there's a reason why we choose different types when we're making a document on Microsoft Word. Certain things, fonts we like better, resonate with us. So really, really cool. So now we can move on to this wonderful doozy here. And I'll just stay on the PowerPoint, and then I'll show y'all the actual book in just a second. But this wonderful book that Lori and Jamie let me see, I don't speak Italian, because it's in Italian. So it's a little bit difficult for me to say. So I'm just going to call it History of Gregory the 13th. That's what I'm going to call this book. So this was a doozy, especially since it's in a different language, but it was so much fun. So we've got this book. It's so printed in about 1580. So let's just look at the title page. What can we learn just from the title page? I am not ashamed to use Google Translate. So I often will type in to Google Translate. But the funny thing is I learned with this one, when you type in to Google Translate, if you're typing in the title of a hand press book or a book that was printed, 500 years ago or something, sometimes Google's like, wait, what language is that? It gets a little bit confused because it seems archaic to Google. So that's something to note. But we learn here, just, by piecing together right down here, that this book was originally composed in Latin or written in Latin by Raffaele Riera, and then it was later translated into Italian. So it tells us that one right here in this wonderful, I love the way that it's also printed. We've got this, what I think is a beautiful, of course, woodcut illustration. Now, one thing that I wanted to know, we see here that it was that our printer / publisher was Sebastiano Martellini, and it was published in Macerata, which is a city in Italy. And I thought that was really interesting because I was like, I want to know more about this printer or this publisher. However, I I didn't find a lot of research on this person, but I know what I need. I need, for example, I've got a dictionary of printers and booksellers during the hand press period, but I have one for London. I think I need to find something that kind of does some type of dictionary or some type of encyclopedia of printers and publishers in Italy during this time. So that's how I would find more information about Martellini, but I just don't have that quite yet. So I think that's really interesting. Another thing I noticed is that when I was typing in different parts of this book into Google Translate, it did not come up as Italian. It came up as, I guess it's Corsican. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. It's an area of Italy, a more specific area. I think, and I haven't written down where that is. I think it's it's a municipality in the province of Milan. So I thought that was interesting. Maybe that is another thing I need to so that was something I was wanting to kind of know more about. That's what the language came up as, which is really cool.
It's more of a dialect. I think just above the woodcut where it says Vulgate Italiano.
Yes.
I think that means a dialect of Italian.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much, Nancy. And that actually makes a lot of sense, because that's why it was like, this isn't, just complete, just standard Italian that was coming up. Very interesting. So we've got this next so this is what I wanted to show y'all. I researched this book in OCLC, which stands for the Online Computer Library Center, which maintains WorldCat, which is the world's largest online public access catalog. And so I went into the OCLC, which is kind of the back end that librarians use. And it was very hard to find this, but I did find just one catalog record for this book. And as you can see, it's not a super robust record, but I wanted to see what was in it. And it's not, of course, this one really isn't for English speakers, so it was a little bit difficult to tell. But then I went into WorldCat, and I was finally able to find where this book is held. Honestly, I'm sure it's in private hands in the United States, but in terms of institutionally, it does not look like this particular 1580 copy of this book is really anywhere near us. There were some copies in Germany, but it does not look like I think this book is quite scarce in the US and possibly outside of the US. But I had so much fun looking at this. So again, love that woodcut here. There's so much and I would have to go into an actual content of it. I believe it's a history, of course, of Gregory the 13th, but I have to go into more detail. But the note that Lori gave me when she actually let me look at the book says that this was the same Gregory who invented our Gregorian calendar. So didn't know that, but that was in a note that Lori gave me. So we see why this Gregory would have been important. So I think that's really, really cool. So what I did, though, I wanted to also figure out, is this book complete? How is it put together? So what I did, I wanted to show that too. Sorry. I wanted to just show that someone had written in this book. We see that here. I thought that was really cool. So this was read. This book was read. We know that. At least parts of it were. So I decided to do a formula for this book to see. And this was a skill that I learned in Rare Book School. It takes a lot of practice and it's hard. And thankfully, this book was easy because it was put together the way that it was supposed to be put together. So this was the formula that I created for this book, and this is the breakdown of it. So this means that it is an octavo format. So like we just kind of like what we did when our last little fold that we did. So each sheet was folded so that it would have 8 leaves and 16 pages. So it is octavo. And I was able to locate a watermark, and I was able to locate the direction of the chain lines using my phone light and turning off all the lights in my office, minding it. So the collational formula. So This gets a little bit complicated, but basically there are in general 8 leaves. It goes, so the signatures go from A to O, 8 leaves in each except for O that has only 4 leaves. Most of them have 4 leaves that are signed with the exception of 03 and 04. There are 108 leaves in the book. There are 216 pages. Pages 1 through 2 are not paginated, so I inferred them. Pages 3 through 211 are paginated, and then pages 216 through, or 212 through 216 are not paginated, so I inferred them. So that's basically how you do a formula for that. It was so much fun making a formula for this book. It's, you know, again, it can get really complicated if a book is not put together the way that you think. And it can, there are so many ways it can vary, but it's just so much fun to do. Last thing I wanted to say about bibliography before, I know y'all are probably like, why is she talking so much about this? But there are lots of resources. There are fun things you can do. If you're interested in any of this, I would suggest going on the website of the Bibliographical Society or Bibliographical Society of America. If you're on Twitter, they've got a very active Twitter. There are lots of people that like talking about this. There are things like the Black Bibliography Project. There are resources, print resources like the Bibliography of American Literature. So if you have an American author that you're interested in and you want to know about all the books that they publish and all the different editions and things like that, you can check the BAL. If you've got books that were printed before 1501 or you come in contact with one, it's probably in the ISTC, the Incunabula Short Title Catalog. So I just say that to say there are lots of fun ways to engage in bibliography. Ways that are maybe more scholarly like these, but also things like just kind of researching yourself, kind of Googling, going on ABE books, trying to see different edition of books that are around, like Andrew did with his, being like, I don't think this date is right. What can I find? So there's all different ways to do bibliography, and it's super fun. So that's what I did this summer. And again, thank you so much to Lori and Jamie for allowing me to play with this book. It has been a pleasure. I had so much fun just getting a chance to get to know it. The cool thing about when I make that formula for the books, I look at every single page. I go page by page to make sure every page is accounted for. So that's fun. So I didn't get as much into the content, more so into how it's put together and who was involved in putting it together. That's what I've been learning to do. So much fun. But anyway, that's what I have for everybody today. Thank you all so much for indulging me. I felt like, because I know that most people don't care about stuff like this, but I think it's really fun. It's fun to look at books in different ways. We love to read them, but we also love to understand them as objects. And does anyone, for the last we got 2 minutes, does anyone have a story that they want to share about this summer that they didn't get to share earlier?
No, but I have a question.
Yes.
Is that the original cover?
That is a
little bubble in my house, which means somebody can't work, and that's really not an option. Or do we just have to like hope and pray for the best? Because
okay, there we go. So actually, this answers a great question. I was wondering, to me, this one looks like it might be kind of almost like a temporary binding, I think. I mean, I think there's definitely, I think this might have been a printer's binding potentially, because usually printers would do things, and I don't have an example right here, but they will do something in wrapper. So they'll put something basically in kind of like a quick paper, or in kind of cheaper boards. And then someone else, they would have expected the owner of the book to maybe get a really nice leather or gilt binding. So I think this was meant to be a temporary binding, but it became the long-term binding. So that's what I think. It's mostly just paper, maybe a little bit of vellum here, but mostly just paper and just a tiny bit of vellum.
Thank you.
course. Anybody else? Well, all right. Well, thank y'all so much for joining us again. Next week is going to be so much fun. We're going to talk about something totally different. And that's what I love about this program. We're going to like fast forward tons of years. So it'll be really, really fun. So this program keeps you on your toes, keeps you jumping. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I hope everyone had fun, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Very much. It's really interesting.
Great.
Thank
And
you.
Jamie, I absolutely see your message. We will connect.
Ellen, can you tell us anything about Bob Williams? How he's
Oh, yes, update. Yes, he is doing very well. I just talked to him because he was planning on coming to campus more, but I think the Delta variant is making him like, I don't know if I want to come to campus, but he is doing absolutely fine. He is still, of course, doing his book collecting, and he brought in a couple books not too long ago. He couldn't make it today, but he's going to make as many virtual programs as he can.
All right, thank you.
All right, of course. All righty.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.